At dinner, my husband looked me straight in the eye and said, "Tell them the truth." The entire room went silent. His sister handed me an envelope labeled "Paternity Test Results." My mother-in-law stood up her chair, scraping loudly against the hardwood floor, and said, "Pack your things and get out." The words landed like a slap. Before I could even draw breath to respond, the doorbell rang sharp, insistent, cutting through the tension like a blade. Every head turned toward the front door. No one moved. In that frozen moment, with my 5-year-old son Noah hiding under the table clutching my leg, I realized my entire life was about to unravel in front of the people I had called family for 16 years. Just 3 hours earlier, the evening had felt almost ordinary. I stood in our kitchen in Willow Creek, a quiet suburb outside Chicago, rinsing cherry tomatoes for the salad I planned to bring to Margaret's house. Noah was perched on a stool beside me, his small hands carefully stacking wooden blocks into a wobbly tower. "Mommy, look, it's a skyscraper," he announced proudly, his voice bright and full of that pure 5-year-old wonder. I smiled, brushing a curl from his forehead. And for a second, everything felt right. The late afternoon sun filtered through the window, warming the counters where David and I had shared countless cups of coffee over the years. 16 years of marriage, a home we built together, a child we both adored. My phone buzzed on the counter. It was David. "Hey," I answered, tucking the phone between my shoulder and ear while reaching for a dish towel. "I'm just finishing up here. Should we leave around 5:30? There was a pause on his end, longer than usual. "Actually, can you come to Mom's a bit earlier? She wants everyone there by 6. It's important." His voice sounded tight, controlled in that way he got when something weighed on him, but he didn't want to show it. I frowned, glancing at the clock. "Important, how is everything okay? Just come," he replied. "We'll talk when you get here." The line went quiet before I could press further. I told myself not to overthink it. Margaret, my mother-in-law, had always liked hosting these sudden family gatherings. She thrived on being the center, the one who held everyone together with her perfectly set table and quiet expectations. Still, something in David's tone lingered as I helped Noah into his favorite blue sweater and buckled him into the car. The drive was quiet except for Noah humming along to the radio. Golden light stretched across the neat lawns of the neighborhood as we pulled up to Margaret's colonial-style home. Every car was already there, Rebecca's sleek SUV, Uncle Paul's truck, even Cousin Lisa's minivan. My stomach tightened slightly. This wasn't just dinner. Margaret opened the door before I could knock. Her smile was brief, almost strained. "Come in, Anna. No warm hug tonight." I stepped inside with Noah on my hip, the familiar scent of pot roast and polished wood greeting me. The family was gathered in the dining room instead of the living room chairs arranged around the long oak table, as if waiting for a meeting rather than a meal. Conversations died the moment I entered. David stood by the window, hands in his pockets. Not meeting my eyes at first. Noah sensed the shift and pressed closer to me. We sat. Plates were passed in near silence. I tried to make small talk with Rebecca, but her responses were clipped. Then, halfway through the main course, David set his fork down. He looked across the table at me, his expression unreadable. "Tell them the truth, Anna." My heart stuttered. Rebecca slid a plain white envelope across the table. The words, "Paternity Test Results," were printed clearly on the front. My fingers felt numb as I picked it up. Margaret rose slowly, her posture rigid with controlled anger. "This has gone on long enough. Pack your things and get out of our lives." The room held its breath. Noah whimpered softly under the table, his small hand gripping my calf. I opened my mouth to speak, but the doorbell rang 2 firm chimes that shattered the heavy silence. Everyone froze. David's jaw clenched. Margaret's eyes narrowed toward the hallway. Whoever was at the door had arrived at the exact moment everything was falling apart. I sat there, envelope in hand, heart pounding against my ribs, wondering how a normal Tuesday evening had turned into this. The life I thought was solid suddenly felt like glass under pressure, one crack away from shattering completely. No one moved to answer the door. The bell rang again, but it might as well have been miles away. All eyes stayed fixed on me. My fingers trembled slightly as I tore open the envelope. The paper inside was crisp official, the kind of document that carried the weight of certainty. I scanned the header Northlake DNA Diagnostics, and then the single line that stopped my world-cold probability of paternity 0%. Noah isn't biologically related to David Thompson. The room remained deathly quiet except for the soft ticking of the grandfather clock in the hall. David finally spoke, his voice flat and exhausted, like a man who had rehearsed this moment too many times in his head. Noah isn't mine. I looked up at him, searching for any sign of doubt or pain in the man I had shared a bed with for 16 years. There was only a distant weariness. Margaret stood, taller arms crossed, her silver hair catching the warm light from the chandelier. Rebecca leaned forward, her expression a mix of pity and judgment. We all saw the results, Anna. There's no point pretending anymore. This can't be right, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. I set the paper down carefully as if it might burn me. There has to be a mistake. Labs mix up samples. It happens. Noah shifted against my leg under the table, his breathing quick and shallow. I reached down and rested a hand on his back, feeling the rapid rise and fall of his small chest. He didn't understand the words, but he understood the tone. Children always do. Margaret's laugh was short and bitter. A mistake. After everything we've done for you, David has been carrying this doubt for weeks, and now we have proof. She gestured at the document like it was Exhibit A in a trial. Uncle Paul cleared his throat from the far end of the table but said nothing. Cousin Lisa stared into her plate, suddenly fascinated by the pattern on the china. 16 years. I thought of the nights David came home defeated after losing his job in 2019, how I had worked extra shifts at the hospital so we wouldn't lose the house. The quiet anniversaries where we chose each other again and again. The way he used to pull me close in the kitchen and whisper that Noah had my smile. All of it suddenly felt fragile. I have never been unfaithful, I said clearly, meeting David's eyes. Not once. Not ever. You know me, David. You know the life we built. Rebecca muttered under her breath, just loud enough for everyone to hear. Tests don't lie, though. She tapped her manicured nail on the table. And let's be honest, that business trip to Denver 6 years ago was awfully convenient timing. The accusation landed heavily. I felt heat rise in my cheeks but kept my posture straight. That was a medical conference. I presented research. There were over 300 people there. You're reaching because you want this to make sense. Noah whimpered softly. I eased my chair back and lifted him onto my lap, wrapping my arms around his warm little body. He buried his face in my shoulder, his fingers clutching the fabric of my blouse. The scent of his shampoo strawberry from the kids' section filled my nose and grounded me. Margaret stepped closer, her voice low, and controlled the way she spoke when she was issuing final judgment. For Noah's sake, Anna, stop this. Admit what happened, and leave with whatever dignity you have left. We'll make sure the boy is taken care of. But this family has been through enough deception. I'm not leaving my son, I replied, my tone sharpening despite myself. And I'm not confessing to something I didn't do. This test is wrong. David ran a hand over his face, looking older than his 45 years. I needed to know Anna. The doubts kept growing. The way Noah doesn't have my eyes or my build. I had to be sure. His voice cracked just slightly on the last word, revealing the first real fracture in his armor. The doorbell rang a third time, longer and more insistent. Still no one answered it. The tension in the room thickened, pressing against my chest. I held Noah tighter, feeling his heartbeat against mine, and realized with painful clarity that in their eyes, I had already been convicted. The evidence was in black and white, and my 16 years of loyalty suddenly counted for nothing. I looked around the table at the faces that had once welcomed me, some warmly, others with reservation, and felt the slow fracture of something deeper than anger. It was the quiet death of belonging. The doorbell rang once more, echoing through the house like an unwelcome intruder. Margaret glanced toward the hallway with irritation, but made no move to answer it. The sound faded, leaving only the heavy silence of the dining room. All pretenses of a family dinner had vanished. This had become something else entirely, a courtroom with me on trial, and no defense attorney in sight. Rebecca leaned forward, her eyes sharp. "So you're really going to sit there and claim the test is wrong?" After David went through all the trouble to get real answers, her voice carried that familiar mix of concern and superiority she often used when correcting others. Uncle Paul finally spoke, his deep voice rumbling. "Anna, we've all seen the numbers. 0% doesn't leave much room for interpretation." I kept one arm wrapped firmly around Noah, who had started to tremble. His small body felt so fragile against mine. "I don't know how to explain a result I know is false," I said, forcing myself to meet their gazes one by one. "But I do know my own life. 16 years with your brother, your son. Late nights at the hospital supporting him when the company downsized, building this family from the ground up. Why would I throw that away?" David sat motionless at the head of the table, staring at his clasped hands. He hadn't looked at me directly since handing over the envelope. Margaret paced slowly behind her chair, her heels clicking against the floor with each measured step. "Because things happen, Anna. People make mistakes. The trip to Denver, the long hours you kept after Noah was born. It all adds up." She stopped and placed both hands on the table, leaning in. David deserved better than to raise another man's child. The words cut deeper than I expected. I felt heat rise in my throat, but swallowed it down. Noah lifted his head, his eyes wide and confused. "Mommy, why is Grandma mad?" His voice, small and uncertain, broke something inside the room. Rebecca shifted uncomfortably. Cousin Lisa looked away, suddenly finding the curtains interesting. "I'm not mad at you, sweetheart," Margaret said, her tone softening only for him. Then her eyes returned to me, cold again. "But your mother needs to be honest. For everyone's sake." I stroked Noah's back in slow circles the way I had since he was an infant. "There is nothing to confess. I stood by this family through every crisis. When David's father passed, when Rebecca went through her divorce, I was here. Cooking meals, watching children, listening to all of you. And now one piece of paper erases all of that." Uncle Paul cleared his throat again. "It's not just the paper." David had suspicions for a while. A man knows when something feels off. David finally spoke, his voice low. "I needed proof, Anna. I couldn't keep wondering." Every time I looked at him, the questions got louder. He glanced at Noah briefly, then away as if the sight hurt too much. That small rejection stung worse than any accusation. I felt my chest tighten. "So instead of talking to me, you went behind my back, collected samples, and brought the results here for a public execution. This isn't how we solve problems in a marriage. This is how you destroy one." The doorbell rang again, 3 sharp chimes this time. Margaret's jaw clenched. "Whoever that is can wait. This is more important." She turned back to me. "You betrayed this family, Anna. You came into our lives, took our son, and gave him someone else's child to raise. At least have the decency to admit it and step aside." Her words landed with finality. Noah began to cry quietly against my shoulder, his tears soaking through my blouse. I rocked him gently, whispering soft reassurances into his hair while the rest of the room watched. The air felt thick, suffocating, filled with the scent of cooling pot roast and unspoken judgments. I could sense the walls of belonging I had carefully built over 16 years crumbling with every passing second. Rebecca murmured something to Lisa, who nodded. David remained silent, caught between his mother's certainty and whatever remained of his feelings for me. In that moment, surrounded by the people who were supposed to be my support system, I had never felt more alone. The trial had reached its verdict long before any real evidence was heard. The doorbell rang again, louder this time, cutting through Margaret's final accusation like a judge's gavel. 3 long, deliberate chimes. The sound vibrated through the dining room, refusing to be ignored any longer. Margaret's lips pressed into a thin line. "For heaven's sake," she muttered, finally turning toward the hallway. David stood up slowly, his movements heavy. I remained seated. Noah still curled against my chest, his quiet sobs the only other sound in the room. I heard the front door open. Low voices exchanged a few words. Then footsteps approached, steady, purposeful. A man in his early 50s stepped into the dining room doorway. He wore a dark gray suit, carried a slim leather folder, and moved with the quiet confidence of someone used to delivering difficult news. His silver-streaked hair was neatly combed and wire-rimmed glasses sat on a kind but serious face. "Excuse me for interrupting," he said calmly, his voice carrying clear authority. "I'm Dr. Richard Harlan, Director of Northlake DNA Diagnostics. I believe I have urgent business with this household." Margaret crossed her arms. "This is a private family matter, Doctor. Whatever it is can wait until tomorrow." "I'm afraid it cannot," Dr. Harlan replied. His eyes scanned the room, taking in the uneaten food, the tense faces, and finally landing on the crumpled test results still lying on the table in front of me. "I see you already have our report. That's why I came in person as soon as the audit flagged the issue this afternoon." David stepped forward. "What issue?" The doctor placed his folder on the edge of the table and opened it with practiced efficiency. "There was a serious procedural error with the samples submitted under your case, Mr. Thompson. A labeling mix-up occurred during intake. The chain of custody was broken. The sample we tested and reported on was not yours." The words hung in the air. Rebecca's perfectly arched eyebrows shot up. Uncle Paul leaned forward. Margaret's face remained frozen, but I caught the slight twitch at the corner of her eye. I felt my pulse quicken. Noah had gone still in my arms, as if even he sensed the shift in the room's gravity. Dr. Harlan continued, his tone professional, yet regretful. "We take full responsibility. As soon as the discrepancy was discovered during our internal review, we immediately located the correct samples, verified new ones where necessary, and ran an expedited retest under strict protocol. I brought the corrected results with me." He pulled out a fresh document cream-colored with the lab's official seal. The room watched in stunned silence as he adjusted his glasses and read aloud. "Probability of paternity 99.98%. David Thompson is the biological father of Noah Thompson." No one spoke. The grandfather clock ticked on, marking seconds that felt endless. I closed my eyes for a brief moment, letting the words settle deep inside me. Relief came, but it was layered with something heavier: grief for what had just been said and done in this room. David's face drained of color. He reached out and took the paper from Dr. Harlan, staring at it as if it might change again. This can't be how it works. You sent us the wrong result and now you just..." "We should never have released the initial report," Dr. Harlan interrupted gently but firmly. "That was our failure. I drove here directly from the lab to correct it in person, and to apologize to everyone involved, especially to Mrs. Thompson." He turned toward me, his expression softening. "Ma'am, I am truly sorry for the pain this error has caused you tonight." Margaret recovered first, though her voice lacked its earlier steel. "So you're saying the first test was completely invalid?" "Legally and scientifically, yes," Dr. Harlan confirmed. "It should never have been issued. We will of course cover any costs and provide full documentation for your records." The silence that followed was different from the judgmental one before. This one was thick with discomfort, with the sound of shifting chairs and averted eyes. Rebecca stared at her hands. Uncle Paul rubbed the back of his neck. David kept reading the new report over and over, as if willing the numbers to make sense of the last 30 minutes. I stood slowly, lifting Noah with me. His arms tightened around my neck. The weight of my son felt grounding, real, undeniable. I looked at the faces around the table, the same ones that had been so certain of my guilt only moments ago, and felt a quiet strength rise within me. Dr. Harlan closed his folder. "I'll leave copies here. If you have any questions, my direct line is on the cover letter. Again, my deepest apologies." With a respectful nod toward me, he turned and saw himself out. The front door clicked shut behind him. The echo of it seemed to mark the true end of the evening's nightmare. Yet as I stood there in the suddenly smaller dining room surrounded by my accusers, I realized the damage had already been done. The truth had arrived, but it couldn't erase the words that had been spoken or the way they had looked at me. The front door clicked shut behind Dr. Harlan, leaving a silence so complete it felt almost sacred. No one wanted to be the first to speak. David still held the corrected report, his eyes moving across the numbers as if they might disappear. Margaret lowered herself slowly into her chair, her usual composure cracked. Rebecca stared at the tablecloth, tracing a pattern with her fingertip. The pot roast had gone cold, the candles burned lower. And the room that once felt warm and familiar now seemed foreign. David finally looked at me. Really looked. Anna. I don't know what to say. His voice was rough, stripped of its earlier certainty. I adjusted Noah on my hip. He had grown heavy, but I wasn't ready to put him down. You don't have to say anything right now, I replied quietly. The test was wrong, we all heard it. But that's not what hurts the most. Margaret lifted her head. It was a terrible mistake by the lab. Obviously. No one could have known. Please, I cut in, my tone calm but firm. Don't. You stood in this room and told me to pack my things. You looked at my son and called him someone else's child. You all did. I glanced around the table. 16 years of marriage, of holidays, hospital visits, supporting each other through job losses and family deaths. And one piece of paper was enough for you to believe the worst of me. Rebecca shifted but remained silent. David rubbed his forehead. I was scared, he admitted. The doubts started small and grew. I should have come to you first. Instead, I went to the lab. Then I let this family meeting happen. He gestured weakly at the room. I didn't expect it to go this far. You didn't stop it either, I said. The words weren't angry, just honest. When your mother told me to get out, when Rebecca brought up Denver like it was proof you sat there. That silence hurt more than the accusation. Noah rested his head on my shoulder, his breathing steadier now. I stroked his back, drawing comfort from his warmth. David took a step closer but stopped when I didn't move to meet him. The distance between us felt wider than the oak table. Margaret cleared her throat. We were trying to protect the family. David is my son. When he came to me with those doubts, what was I supposed to do? Ask questions, I answered. Give me the benefit of the doubt after 16 years. Treat me like a member of this family instead of an outsider who finally got caught. My voice remained steady, but my hand tightened slightly on Noah's sweater. Instead, you held a trial, and you found me guilty before I even sat down. The chandelier light caught the new report still in David's hand. He set it down carefully as if it were fragile. I'm sorry, Anna. I'm so damn sorry. For the first time that evening, his eyes glistened. Not dramatic tears, just the raw regret of a man realizing he had broken something precious. I nodded once. I believe you're sorry. But sorry doesn't fix what happened here tonight. I need time. Noah needs stability. We're going home. Margaret started to protest. It's late. We should talk this through as a family. This stopped being a family discussion the moment you told me to leave, I said gently but decisively. Right now, I need space from all of this. David didn't argue. He simply nodded, looking exhausted. Take the car. I'll stay here tonight and come by tomorrow if that's okay. It's not okay yet, I told him. But we'll talk soon. Not here. Not with an audience. I gathered my purse and walked toward the door. Noah waved sleepily at his father over my shoulder. Night, Daddy. The innocent words landed heavily in the quiet room. David's face tightened with emotion as he whispered, Good night, buddy. The night air felt cool and cleansing as I stepped outside. I buckled Noah into his seat, his eyelids already heavy. As I drove through the quiet suburban streets, the dashboard lights casting a soft glow on my hands, the weight of the evening settled over me. Streetlights passed in steady rhythm. I kept glancing at the rearview mirror, watching my son sleep peacefully, completely unaware of how close he had come to being torn from everything familiar. 16 years. I had believed our foundation was strong. Tonight showed me how quickly doubt could erode even the sturdiest marriage when fear replaced conversation. The lab had made an error, but the real mistake belonged to all of us in that room, how easily we let suspicion win over trust. By the time I pulled into our driveway, the house dark and waiting, I felt drained but clear-headed. I carried Noah inside, laid him gently in his bed, and sat on the edge for a long time, listening to his even breathing. The truth had returned my son's father to him, but trust that would have to be rebuilt slowly, carefully, and only if both of us were willing to do the hard work. The next morning felt strangely normal. Sunlight streamed through the kitchen windows as I made coffee, and Noah ate his oatmeal, chatting happily about dinosaurs. The house was quiet except for his small voice. No calls yet, no knocks. I moved through the familiar routines, deliberately letting them anchor me after the storm of the previous night. Around 9:30, a soft knock came at the front door. I already knew who it was. David stood on the porch alone, wearing the same clothes from dinner, looking like he hadn't slept. His eyes were tired but clear. No flowers, no rehearsed speech, just him. "Can I come in?" he asked quietly. I stepped aside. He entered slowly as if the house might reject him. Noah looked up from his toys in the living room and broke into a wide smile. "Daddy!" He ran over on his sturdy little legs and threw his arms around David's knees. David crouched down immediately, pulling Noah into a tight embrace. For a long moment he just held him, eyes closed, breathing in the scent of his son. I watched from the doorway, arms folded loosely, not coldly but protectively. David finally stood still, holding Noah on his hip. "I don't deserve how easy that was," he said, his voice thick. "Not after last night." "No, you don't," I replied evenly. "But he does. He deserves his father." We sat at the kitchen table. Noah eventually wandered back to his toys, leaving us in a heavy but necessary silence. David rubbed his hands together, searching for the right words. I spent the night replaying everything. The way I let Mom take control. The way I sat there while they attacked you. I was supposed to be your husband, Anna. Instead, I became part of the jury. He looked up, meeting my eyes. "I'm sorry, not just for the test, for choosing fear over trust. For letting 16 years disappear because I couldn't face a doubt head-on." I poured him a cup of coffee out of habit, then sat across from him. "The lab made an error, but you made a choice. You went behind my back instead of talking to me. You brought our private life into that room and let them tear me down. That's what I keep coming back to." He nodded, accepting it without defense. "I know. Mom called me this morning. She wants to apologize in person, but I told her it has to wait. You set the pace now." Later that afternoon, Margaret did come alone. She stood in our living room posture, straighter than usual, but her hands clasped tightly. "I was wrong, Anna," she said after a long pause. The words seemed to cost her. "I let my need to protect David override everything else. I judged you harshly when I should have listened. I'm sorry for the pain I caused you and Noah last night." It wasn't a warm embrace or tears. Margaret didn't work that way, but for her the admission was significant. I accepted it with a small nod. "Thank you. But I need something more than words. I need boundaries. David and I will decide what's best for our family. That includes how much influence extended family has in our marriage." She accepted the condition with quiet dignity before leaving. Over the following weeks, rebuilding wasn't dramatic or swift. David started seeing a counselor first. Then we began couple sessions together. Some nights we talked until early morning. Other nights we sat in silence, simply sharing space while Noah played between us. Trust didn't flood back. It returned in careful layers, in the way he now asked questions instead of assuming, and how he defended our decisions when Margaret offered unsolicited advice. In the small moments when he reached for my hand and I let him. One evening, weeks later, we sat at our own dining table. Noah climbed into David's lap, playing with the buttons on his shirt. "Daddy read the dinosaur book again," he demanded. David smiled, really smiled, and began reading. I watched them, the easy love between father and son fully restored. The sight didn't erase the memory of that terrible dinner, but it reminded me why we were doing the hard work. I had learned that trust isn't blind faith. It's a deliberate choice made every day, especially after it has been broken. Family isn't just blood or marriage certificates. It's the people willing to face their mistakes and do better. Sometimes truth arrives dramatically like a doorbell in the middle of chaos. But real healing happens in the quiet afterward, in honest conversations, consistent actions, and the courage to try again. If you've ever had your trust shattered by the people closest to you, or wondered whether a marriage could survive doubt and judgment, I hope this story reminds you that healing is possible when both sides choose to do the real work. What would you have done in my place? How do you rebuild trust once it's been broken? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Tell me where you're listening from and what this story brought up for you. If stories like this, real, raw, and ultimately hopeful, resonate with you, please share it with someone who might need it. And subscribe so you don't miss the next one. We have many more journeys through love, family, and second chances waiting. Thank you for spending this time with me. Let's keep walking through these stories together.